is overtime here again at Old Favorite Friday, and this is a very special Old Favorite Friday, Ralph. This is the 100th beer that we have done for Old Favorite Friday. We've been doing this for almost 2 years now, if I do my math correctly, because we do one every single week. And it does not mean, by the way, if someone's going to go and look at the YouTube videos, not all of them are on YouTube. Just like anything, when the series started, it was much smaller, so forgive us for this. But trust me, we have done 100 beers as of now with Killian's Irish Red Lager. Now, I know some of you people are thinking, right? This is a Molson Coors beer, macro beer. It's available all over the place, every grocery store in the world. I mean, being a little facetious there, but still very, very widely available. And some people are like, that's not even a craft beer. Maybe it's not even that good of a beer. Listen, this was the beer the first beer I drank that was not a Budweiser, that was not a Miller Lite, what have you. The first beer that I drank with a little bit of color to it, a little bit of malt flavor, a little bit of hop flavor, that made me feel like I was drinking a beer, that made me feel like a cool guy. Like I'd bring this 6-pack to a party and I was like, yeah, I'm the guy who brought the good beer. And to this day, I will say that this is a good beer. This is the beer that I like to drink. It's clean, it's refreshing, it does give you malt flavor. It's a little more interesting than a typical macro lager. I think it's just a really, really good beer, and it's widely available, and I don't think we give it enough appreciation. Ralph, you hadn't had one of these in a while, quite a while. You did say you had some of that same experience growing up, like thought you were the cool guy because you had Killian's Irish Red. What's your impressions after having this for the first time in a while?
So I'm really enjoying. The one thing I want to kind of backtrack to say is, because of course you're not like, there's like one stout you can bring, so you're like, oh, I want to be a little different, I'm going to bring an Irish Red. So yeah, totally, 100% similar backstory. But I'm getting, it's almost like I would say a caramel, and as I was saying before, like an orchard fruit, because it's not quite, it's cleaner than a breadiness, which I'm sure it has to do with even that lager fermentation. But there's a sweetness that I really like because, like I said, and actually, that would be a perfect way to put it. It's a caramel apple because it's not when like sometimes you're heavy-handed with caramel malt. So there's none of that astringency, which is so great. It's super smooth, but you get like those like kind of pear, apple, almost even like a stone fruit with just that sweetness overlaying everything. And I really like it. It's almost, especially, even though it's never cool here, for this time of year, it seems like an appropriate beer with some of the foods we'll be eating as the holidays come up. It actually almost seems like a liquid version of that.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about notes of apple. I'm getting a little bit like a berry fruit thing going on there. Obviously, the caramel flavor in there. But one of the things I love about this is this beer is so drinkable, and we use that term a lot, and some people think that's lost all its meaning because we use it too much, but it's a very drinkable beer, and it's so accessible. If you bring this to an event, and you are like, okay, I'm going to bring a beer that I can drink, I can enjoy, right, that I'm going to, has a flavor profile that's a little more interesting than just pond water, right, I'm going to bring this, and other people who maybe aren't real craft beer drinkers are going to enjoy. You're right in the wheelhouse here. You can introduce a lot of people to the world of more flavorful beer by bringing a beer like Killian's Irish Red Lager. The other thing I want to mention is a lot of people, I hear this all the time, or not all the time, I don't drink this beer all the time, but a lot of people think it's an ale. It was originally introduced in the US as Killian's Irish Red Ale and kind of popularized the red ale, the term Irish Red in the lexicon, but this is a lager. I believe it's been a lager, if not from the very inception, early on. So that's a little bit of a thing that I've picked up with on some people. But this beer did get me into trying to find other beers that had the term red in them, right? Whether it's a red ale, red lager, and really drove my love for malty beers. I mean, to this day, we just made a Marzen. We had this huge long thing where we did all these Marzens for Old Favorite Friday because it's my favorite beer style. Well, what is it? It's an amber to brown lager, right? With a nice malt profile. Now, this is not a Marzen, right? By any stretch of the imagination, it's a very different beer, but you're in that same ballpark and talking about some of the flavors and things of that nature. So it's obvious that this beer has imprinted on me and really informed a lot of my flavor choices going forward.
Yeah, and I actually kind of like it as a change up from like, because we've been doing a lot of Marzens, and it's cool because like maybe color-wise, if you can see that on camera.
A really nice red tint to
it. It's would look similar, and you could say they're both lagers, but because they're from different parts of the world, their flavor profiles are very different. Like when you see this at first glance, you'd be like, well, that looks like it should taste similar to a Marzen, but it doesn't at all. It's got its very own like British profile, which I'm a British beer guy along with hops and everything else. But so like I really like it because it reminds me of that, you know, when you first get into British ales and you might try like an English mild or some of the pub, cask styles. This kind of has that, while being its own thing, it kind of has that feel to it. So yeah, it's interesting because you think of certain styles when it comes to whether it's Ireland or Scotland or England, certain, like, you always think of them as the ales, but to do a red lager, that's like a really cool take on it, that, it doesn't have to just be like a German style. Like, there's other people who can do it, and obviously been doing it very well for a long time.
And just red ale profile is something, every brewery I've ever been to, I've wanted to do a red ale, and I've done a red ale, and I love that flavor profile. Once again, we don't do a lot of lagers, that's why we do ales more often. Quicker turnaround time, it's a little more flavorful, a little bit more body, so that's kind of more my wheelhouse normally. But I love the aspects that kind of make this beer up, and I love having something that is widely available and that I can really enjoy and really dig into, and that can be accessible for a lot of people. Amberbach is another example that, growing up in Michigan, and you go to a bar and you like craft beer, but there's no craft beer on the menu, and you saw an Amberbach, I was like, okay, I guess we're getting a picture of Amberbach. You see an Killian's, you go after that one. So you might just see Amberbach show up in here one time. We've been recommended to do that beer several times now. But listen, just because it's mass produced, just on the grocery store shelves, just because it's made by one of the big boys, the Budweisers, the Miller Coors, those guys, they know how to make beer. Yeah. Technically, they know how to make beer. The flavor profiles that they typically do are made for a non-sophisticated beer palate. And that's all it really is. But when they're trying to get down to no imperfections, going down to the science of brewing, they're absolutely incredible. And I think that's why you could make a beer like this so good, so consistently, and have it all over the place.
And the one thing I wanted to comment to that is, because this is such a, in my opinion, a flawless beer. When you were talking about even like the setting when you're with people at a barbecue or whatever, I could see going to this, because like, even let's say you're at a barbecue but you're with some of your craft beer friends, and some of them, let's say, aren't craft beer people, I could see gravitating towards this, because a lot with like bottle shares, everybody always brings the crazy beer, and they're like, they might just be into craft beer, or they're not, because this is always the brewer versus customer argument, but like, yeah, so they're going to bring some crazy imperial stout or whatever, but I'm going to actually be hanging out with the non-craft beer people drinking this, because like, yeah, I might want 2 sips of this crazy beer with donuts or whatever in it, but like, this is a beer I enjoy in the way, after now at this point, whether I was brewing or not, just drinking craft beer for over 10 years now, I want to say, like, it's nice to go back to like just have a beer flavored beer. Some of my friends say, like, I don't want 500 ingredients in it, and like this I could drink a few of and just really enjoy myself, as opposed to trying to swallow something down to be nice to someone when you're like, oh, that's not beer. So this is something I would definitely bring to a barbecue or any kind of event and just chug a bunch of these.
Well, listen, we appreciate you. So many of you guys have stuck with us and see 100, up to 100 versions of this, give or take, of our Old Favorite Friday. We'll be doing this going forward. We love doing it. We have tons and tons of other beers to do. Tons of beers that we love. Tons of beers that you guys are suggesting. So please keep those suggestions running in. We try to work them in as much as we possibly can. Please poke around on the channel, like, subscribe. See more conversations with Ralph and I talking about beers like this that are widely available, more niche beers, kind of everything on the spectrum, but everything that is well-made, excellent beers that we love as people in the craft beer industry. And we'll see you next week. Cheers.
Cheers.